Hi friends, how are you? Here we are at the Serenity Room at KBMC, and I wanted to share with you these devotions in these times that we have in different shifts. We are not seeing each other so often like before. So I will be posting every week on Wednesdays a devotion here for all of us. The same one that we share here in the hospital in the different departments and units. So I wanted to start the devotion today asking you maybe a very silly question for these days. Uh, so when I ask you this, you will say, Nestor, please, are you really asking that? Yes, I'm asking. So the question is, are you feeling anxious? It's kind of an obvious question these days with everything that is going on, with everything we are going through, everywhere in the world. Are you anxious? Of course I'm anxious, all the time. Um, this weekend I came across a book by Dr. Robert Leahy. He wrote the book Anxiety Free: Unravel Your Fears Before They Unravel You. Good title. So he studies anxiety for the last 7 decades. And he says this: the average American child today exhibits the same level of anxiety as the average psychiatric patient did in the 50s. Now, just let that sink in for a bit. A child today exhibits the same level of anxiety that a psychiatric patient did in the 50s. So we are living in a society that is full of anxiety, and now on top of that, all this crisis. Why do we feel anxious? Why anxiety is so common, so present? Well, Daniel Gilbert, sociologist, he says we are anxious because as human beings we have a characteristic that defines and separates us from the other animals. And he says the human being is the only animal that, how would you complete that phrase? The human being is the only animal that, here some of our answers were the only animal that thinks, the only animal that murders, the only animal that knows it's going to die. Those were some of the answers. Well, Daniel Gilbert says that human beings are the only animal that think about the future. That's why we become anxious, because we have this ability to think about the future. Now, he says that the average adult thinks about the future 12% of the day. That's 1 out of 8 hours. It's quite a bit, isn't it? Now, I have to share with you that in my profession, in my practice, I have found that behind almost all anxieties, mine and from my clients and patients, and behind that, if we keep following the path, there are 2 words, only 2 words. If you keep going and keep trying to find the reason for the anxiety, there are 2 words that come up once and again. And those 2 words are, and pay attention to this, these 2 words are, what if? What if? What if I am not able to pay the mortgage? What if the economy keeps going down south and I cannot retire? What if a loved one gets sick or I get sick with the COVID-19? What if? And those what if makes us feel full of anxiety. Now, for all of these things we are talking about, there is a message. Saint Peter wrote a letter to a group of people that at that point in history, at the beginning of the first century, they were being persecuted. They were a minority that were very badly treated, and they were dying in many cases. Like the the Jews during the Second War, like the LGBT community not long ago, like the Gypsies, different minorities that have been persecuted and mistreated very unfairly. So he's saying to this group that is very anxious because their lives are at risk, he says something that if you come here to the Serenity Room and if you look to that wall that I have in front of me, Emily very kindly, she left there a verse from 1 Peter 5:7. It says, cast all your anxiety on him, for he cares for you. Cast all your anxiety on him because he cares for you. Now, the way that Peter conveys this, we kind of miss it a little bit in the English language, but the word cast, some versions translate it as casting, it's a very strong word in Greek. It's a vigorous action. Picture it like this. Imagine a rancher in Texas that is grabbing bales of hay and casting them out of his pickup truck, and grabs another bale of hay very vigorously and casts them out of that pickup truck. That's the way that Peter talks about our anxieties. Take them and cast them because he cares for you. Cast them on him. Don't embrace them. Don't keep them for yourself. Don't pet them. Cast them on him because he cares for you. Now, we can say, Nestor, this is hard to do. This is very hard to do. Yes, it is. It takes practice, it takes God's presence, but isn't it hard to live the whole day anxious and going back and back to our what ifs, going back and feeling anxious all the time? That's also hard. So it's hard to cast them on the Lord, but it's also hard not to. So we have a choice that we can make, and I want to encourage you today, even in the midst of this terrible situation, even in the midst of all these anxieties and things that we don't know what is going to happen, cast all your anxieties on him because he cares for you. That's the promise. And we can choose to do that and live with less anxiety today. God bless you. See you next week.